Hello, everyone. We are back with another interview on human. Today, we will be interviewing Grace Guffey, an attachment trauma therapist who will be giving us insight on what trauma looks like, how it affects us mentally, and also giving us insight into her life. Let us welcome her in. Give me 1 second, and she will introduce herself.
Hello.
Hey, Grace, nice to have you back.
I know it's
It's
been
been a while.
forever.
Yeah, it's been forever. I remember when you was on Campfire Sessions. That was an amazing session. Oh man, so many people rave about your insight that you was able to give us during that session. It was wow. It was something definitely to remember. I remember how I even
Good. I'm
met
glad
you.
it's
You remember
helpful.
that? Huh?
What's that?
You remember how I met you?
Yes,
I remember how I met you.
at Public House, right?
Yeah, at Public House. Yes, I remember that clear as day. That was funny. That was
Back
good.
in
That
my
was good.
drinking days, y'all.
Yeah, yeah, that was the drinking days.
Not
Oh man,
anymore.
not
Been
anymore,
sober
huh?
since last June. Yeah.
Since last June, congratulations. I know
Yeah,
that takes a
yeah.
while, I'm on my own journey towards total sobriety. I was already not too, heavy on the drinking, probably like once a week. But I decided that this year I wanted to see who I was at 100%,
Oh,
try to get
yeah.
to that 100 without any crutch. And boy, has it been an emotional roller coaster. But that's what you specialize in, and that's what we're here for today.
Yeah.
Can
Yeah.
you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Awesome.
Great, great, great. I want to go ahead and let me just tap this. Great. So I wanted to start off by having you introduce yourself to the audience.
Hi, I'm Grace. I feel like I've been saying this a lot doing my videos. I'm a licensed mental health counselor and supervisor specializing in attachment trauma therapy. And I'm actually just coming back to my practice um, after thinking I wasn't going to do this anymore. So it's good to be back.
If you don't mind me asking before we jump into the interview, what made you think you weren't going to do it anymore?
Well, I went through a lot when I had my daughter. The birth that I had with her, which was traumatic. I think I was in there for 57 hours, and a lot of things happened without my consent. And so that kind of re-traumatized a lot of past traumas for me. And after I had my daughter, I went right back to work. I took on another position, teaching, and I just did not make any space for that. And I couldn't, I couldn't keep up. I wasn't okay. And I couldn't see my clients and be present with them the way I needed to. And I know as a counselor, it's unethical for us to keep practicing if we're not okay. And I took time to get better, and I wasn't sure if I was going to come back because I've been doing this for a while. But I am much better, and I love what I do, and I think I just can't not do what I do. I think I need to keep helping people, especially now. There's so much suffering that's going on. But I'm going off on a tangent, but that's what happened. But I'm back.
I feel the same way with humans. I'm in a delicate stage of life right now, in a new state, trying to reestablish myself. There's a lot of ups and downs, looking for a job in a place that doesn't necessarily take too kindly to my look.
Oh,
Not necessarily the skin color, but, the gauges and my tattoos,
sure.
despite, what I have going on with human. But nobody really knows about that except, the people online and who I decide to tell.
Right,
So
right.
professional space is kind of interesting to establish myself while still being consistent with these interviews.
Mm-hmm.
That's the name of the game. I cannot let these interviews go. Just like you said, we're in an interesting space right now. especially as humanity. And I think that this platform could definitely do people some good, for sure,
Mm-hmm.
100%, you
Mm-hmm.
know. Um, but I want to start off by diving into your history. So, in your opinion, what do you think it was like for your mother to migrate from the Philippines to the US? If you could put yourself in her shoes.
Yeah. Um, I think if anybody is watching this who has had children, I think you might understand as a woman, like you start to think about your life over time as you become older, you start to think about your own mother. And I thought a lot about my mom's journey because a lot of the decisions I'm making now. But my mother is a amazingly brave person. She had a lot of really tough circumstances where she grew up in the Philippines. And I know she was supposed to be in an arranged marriage and she ran away because she was really young. Um, and she made a life for herself in Manila till, she was working several jobs. And then she met my father. And then eventually she immigrated over here where they got married and had my brother and I. But the reason I say this is because I think a lot of us are very aware of everything that's happening, especially in this country. And I have a lot of conversations with people about safety. So I specialize in helping people who have experienced childhood abuse or childhood traumas and how that gets away in the way of their adult relationships. So I have a lot of conversations about how people feel so unsafe right now for so many reasons. And I think about my mom, how unsafe she felt in the Philippines during that time and why she left. She wanted to bring us here to have a better opportunity and to feel safer. And look at how we are now. And myself, I'm kind of thinking about how safe are we here and having a daughter with the fact that we're losing so many of our rights. And I mean, I can't even begin to explain how that is for you too. So that's where I am personally. It's like I want to help people, but it's hard to say that we're okay. I think it's okay to say we're not okay as human beings, especially over here. It's not safe, and we have to make the same decisions I think my mom did too.
Ooh, I have so many questions about that, but I'm going to only ask one. um, in what way do you feel that we are unsafe? What is like the top way that you see unfolding as the days go by that you feel that we are unsafe? And what would be your take on how can we encourage ourselves moving forward?
Yeah, that's a big question. I think I think a lot of people in different groups can attest that losing your rights in some way, seeing the violence that's being played out. Um, I'm going off a tangent. I'm going to jump to the other part of that question. I'm coming back. Um,
No problem.
I know it can feel so big. Like, what can we do? With everything that is happening, all of these systems that we are so used to are, uh, being destroyed, and the chaos that brings. I know it can feel like, as one person, what can you do? I don't know the exact answer, but I think for me personally, the way I think about it is if I can help the people that I get in contact with and help them learn how to value themselves, that they can see the things around them that are also abusive, so that they can also be strong to say no. I can't fix those systems of oppression from the top, but I think we all, and even things like this where we are communicating with one another, where we can learn and be with one another, I think that is how things are going to continue to change. One thing I'll also say is I think the big changes have actually already happened also. The changes that many of the people that are on top of our systems of oppression, I think they're really afraid, and that's why we're seeing all these things. But I think the changes already happened. My stepdaughter is 16, she thinks differently.
Mm.
My 17-month-year-old, she is like a honey badger. She's feral, and I love it. We have already changed. We already see all the lies. We already see all of that. And I think that's the same process that people go through individually in abusive relationships. You have to kind of lift the veil and really look at what you're seeing, to really look at how you're being exploited, to really look how you're being taken advantage of. And if you understand that on an individual level, I think that will continue to reverberate collectively too.
Mm. Mm. There are so many changes. I think we're in the phase of evolution, despite what is happening. It's like we are definitely in the phase of evolution, especially with the new generation coming up. It's just, I feel like media is such a powerful force that redirects the mind into different directions than
Yeah.
what it's naturally supposed to do. And regarding your birth, how things can be sabotaged since that point, I do see other people taking other routes when it comes to their birth. I know someone that's getting ready to give birth also. I'm going to still keep their identity concealed for their safety. But I do understand that they're not taking the traditional route of it, and they're actually getting a
Midwife?
mid, yeah, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually,
And follow.
that's if I had to ever do this again, which I'm good. uh, I probably would have done that, but my body wasn't set up for that. That's what happened in my case. But I think for a lot of other people, I think, well, I'm going on a tangent on this. I can speak about this a little bit. The medical system we have when it comes to birthing is not, obviously, our system is not set up in most cases to benefit us. And so that medical model can actually be harmful in a lot of ways. So I do commend a lot of women who choose to go other non-medicated routes because it's less traumatic.
Mm.
It's as easy as that. It's just less traumatic.
Mm. You needed to hear that. Oof.
Yeah.
Moving forward, how do you feel? Excuse me. How do you think what your mother went through impacted your upbringing and formed trauma within your life, especially in regards to you having to assimilate and what was the phrase you used? Perform a self-erasure. Am I
Yes.
saying that correct? That right
Yes.
there really took me back. I know that was a mouthful, but
No, that's fine. I'm following. Any of you guys listening out there, probably who are similar in our shoes, if you're first generation, um, I know in Asian cultures and specifically for my experience, it's a lot of assimilation. You're in a new culture, you want to blend in, you want to stay under the radar. And I guess if we can look at all the things that are happening now, there's a lot of reasons why you would want to stay under the radar. Discrimination becomes more violent over time. But when that happens, you are so focused on blending in that you don't have the opportunity to actually understand who you are and how you respond to your environment, your values, your likes, your dislikes. They just all become a mirror of what is supposed to be acceptable. And I grew up at a time, now I'll be 37 soon. So I grew up at a time where during my teenage years, it was all those movies like She's All That and oh my God, I'm forgetting. Like Bring It On. All those movies from those times are really depict a time where it was so misogynistic. I mean, I don't know if we're that much different now, but this is sad. What's happening to us? But I think we have come a little bit from that time. But it's from a time, right, where I think a lot of women too, it was just the culture of the time where as a female, you wanted to be picked by the man and you would do everything to be chosen. And so there's not a lot of autonomy there. And when you're assimilating like that and you lose your sense of self, you're going to experience anxiety, you're going to experience depression, you're going to experience all those things because you're so misaligned from yourself. And sometimes that can manifest into a lot of different things. For me, because my focus was so much on assimilating, I didn't learn how to say no. What I learned during that time as a female was to obey. And that was also my experience growing up, being raised Catholic. I no longer identify with, I'm not really religious or anything like that. I'm more secular now. But I think that coupled with the times of not learning how to use your voice as a female, for me, that led to being taken advantage of during my teenage years, experiencing years of sexual abuse outside of the home for not saying no. And I know that might be hard for some people to hear, but that's why I do what I do. I want to help more and more women be able to learn how to say no. Because I think that's why we have a lot of the atrocities that happen, a lot of the things that I've had to go through that really take your sense of self and not being able to say no. I think we also have a whole generation of people that really struggle to say no. Many of the clients I see are also afraid to say no. And when they do, it's a flood of survival mode in their brains. Your body will react as if you're going through trauma as well. But it's so important to say no, because if you don't, all of these things can happen to you, and you can be a really easy target for future abusive relationships in your adulthood. So I totally went on another tangent. You guys have ADHD, so it's divergent. I'll keep going. You got to stop me.
But I wanted to say that I think being ostracized is another thing that I oftentimes, me myself, I can speak from personal experience. I do speak a certain truth that is definitely unpopular when I'm not doing interviews. I don't talk as much in the interviews. If you notice, I'm pretty quiet. I like to give the floor to the person who I'm interviewing. But I have noticed that group thought in group think has become a very strong thing, and people like to claim very strong opinions, in my opinion, as facts. And I'm like, well, there's a lot of things that we don't know for sure, and that's okay. You know, it's okay, like you said, to not be okay, and it's also okay to say that you don't know. It's okay, because I say it often, like, hey, I don't fully know. This is just my opinion. You know,
Yeah.
We live in a very like I would say PC culture almost, where it's like if you say the wrong thing in a certain group, then you're kind of just ousted. And I could understand where that fear of saying no comes from, and it takes a lot of will. And this is me just speaking to the audience. It takes a lot of willpower to say no in a lot of situations. I have become comfortable with saying no. I still do go through that process where once in a while, I start like, oh, should I? Did I? But what's done is already done. I can't go back on it,
Yeah.
So I just move forward with it. I still continue to live my day, continue to live my life one day at a time. And that's what I advise other people to do, because it's not that guilt trip. Be firm within your decisions. And I know that may not be easy, especially if you lack confidence sometimes. And we all have a wavering of our confidence every once in a while, right? That's not something that we're not 100% of the time. Okay. That's just, in my opinion, impossible. There are only a few that are like that, in my opinion, and it's okay to just be human. So, moving forward, I want to continue by saying, at what point did you start to form your own self-identity while dealing with the feeling of self-erasure? When did that come into play, and how did that look like for you? Excuse me, and what did that look like for you?
Wow. Let me think about this. I wanted to say, like, I started to understand who I was when I was 19 and I went into the Air Force.
Oh,
I had lost, I had a full ride to college before then, but I just, been dealing with a lot of the abuse I wasn't dealing with. It was when I started being really heavy in my addictions. So I had lost my full ride because of that. It wasn't meant to be, it's fine. But I went to the Air Force, and I want to say that's when some of my autonomy started happening. It's also the military, so you don't have a sense of self either. But in the sense of my family's in Florida, and I moved to California. I think that's where you are right now.
oh,
And
Texas.
Texas, oh, my bad. I live there too, actually. But having to live that far away by yourself, I think that space you have from your family of origin will start to let you know your sense of self. And here's an example. When you grow up in your family of origin, you are exposed to their thought, you're exposed to their values, you're exposed to whatever information that comes in, right? And so a lot of your perspectives could be heavily influenced by that. And so when you go out on your own, you're exposed to different people who have had different experiences, different modes of information. You start to take that in and you start to create an understanding for yourself. So it started little bit at that time where I was exposed to different thoughts, and being in the military, being able to be exposed to so many different people. I think that started a little bit, but truthfully, that didn't really come into fruition until I decided to leave the Air Force. I decided not to reenlist. Now, this is my personal experience. I don't want to speak for some of my friends who are veterans that I've known since being in, and some who are still active. For me personally, I was working in military intelligence. I was working in at the NSA, and I hated it because I worked in cubicles, and I can't. But I
It's
also
like
do not. I can't. I'm too ADHD. Like I got yelled at a lot because I would get up and would go around and talk to my friends. uh, but I did not like what we were doing. I guess I'm sure many of you can guess what the NSA does. I thought it was wrong. I also did not agree with some of the things that we had to do. Uh, and that's when I started to go, okay, I have more autonomous thought here. I am disagreeing with something that I come from a military family. So that was, here's the word. It's called cognitive dissonance. When you have a certain sense of thought for a long time, and then you get exposed to a different set of information that directly opposes what you know, it will create cognitive dissonance. It's a sense of disconnect that is almost like painful to your brain. And a lot of people will go into denial with that, or sometimes people will absorb that information, create new perspectives. So I guess you can kind of take that and apply it to where we are right now with all of us in the world. But that started to create dissonance in my political values. And I started going back to school, and as the Air Force, I was poli-sci at the time. And so I wanted to learn more about politics. And then I realized that was all corrupt. I didn't like that either. And so then I found my way to psychology. And then I was like, okay, let me figure out why are all these things corrupt? Why are we like this? And that all of that really started helping me understand the world a lot, uh, a lot more in depth than what I had growing up. So, like I said, I think growing up, a lot of my focus was assimilating that I didn't really understand what was happening out in the world. I think anybody else who also has ADHD or who are also neurodivergent or maybe possibly on the spectrum may not pick up on social cues. So that might not have been the focus either. So I guess, like I said, I think once you leave your family and you start to build your own autonomous life and you get exposed to different people, different information, you can start to make that perspective for yourself. And it may come from those moments of cognitive dissonance. And even if you are presented with information that completely opposes what you have, even though within your body, even though that feels like you want to reject it, and let's say it actually challenges information about yourself that is a part of your identity, it will be even harder to accept that. However, I will encourage a lot of you that if you are in that moment of cognitive dissonance, to be open-minded, to hear that a little bit. You might be surprised how you see the world. I look back as a child and I swear my view of the world was so limited. And I think that also contributed to how a lot of things happened that were not okay. But I think the more that we are educated, the more information that we have, the more that we can understand everything around us, the better we can protect ourselves, the better we can be with one another too, and create a different world that is not built on these individualistic, selfish, narcissistic values that are not good for us. But I've come to that thinking because of that. So let me wrap it back around, and that's how I got there.
Oof, you covered so much. Thank you. That was perfect. um, what causes a person to develop anxiety, in your opinion?
I think it's important to understand what anxiety is.
Mm-hmm.
Anxiety is our body's reaction to a threat. So our brains we have a nervous system, right? So that's all the nerves from the brain extend throughout our body. So like if someone like hits you, that's why you feel it, right? So there's nerves, and it sends messages all throughout the body. So the more primitive part of our brain that houses the amygdala. So all the stuff back here, that's the more primitive part of our brain that is in charge of just basic needs, basic reactions, aggression, things like that. So the nervous system is divided into two systems. One of the systems is called the sympathetic nervous system. That is our fight or flight nervous system. That's when we are in survival mode. So that is triggered when we feel anxiety. So your brain and your body is actually in fight or flight mode. It's in survival mode when you feel anxiety, meaning anxiety is fear. Your body feels fear, you think fear, and so the part of your brain, the amygdala that is in charge of regulating fear is the one that is in charge when you feel that. So when someone experiences anxiety, it is a fear of some sort. So that really depends on the person. So anxiety for one person may be like, let's say for an example, a college student, maybe they're undergrad and they have ADHD, right? And they struggle with standardized testing or long tests. So that's why you'll hear things like testing anxiety. So what that means is that person, when they have to take a test, they are experiencing anxiety. Their heart rate is up, their blood pressure is up, your breathing is shallow, your body is basically thinking it's in life or death. Your brain does not know the difference. Hey, this is just a test. Your brain is like, this is going to kill us. And the reason why it says that is because when it's acting out of here, the brain isn't sending messages up here, which is your frontal lobe. And this is the part of the brain where we have executive functioning, where we can think ahead, think about consequences, or bring information together to make decisions. So when we're in fight or flight, our primitive part of the brain is in charge. So anxiety triggers the fight or flight nervous system. And so when you feel that, it could produce certain thoughts. And those could be fearful thoughts like, I'm going to fail. If I fail this again, my parents will cut me off, or I'm a failure. I can never do anything. I might as well quit. So those are the thoughts that can be produced by the brain going, hey, we are in a fight or flight state. So the brain, you start thinking those fearful thoughts, and those fearful thoughts will turn into fearful emotions. So fear is one of the emotions, but anxiety can turn into irritability. Anxiety can turn into aggression. Anxiety can turn into, I'm losing my train of thought. But those emotions are triggered by the thoughts. Those thoughts are triggered by the brain, thinking it's in a fearful state. And those thoughts and those feelings will lead to behaviors. And those behaviors are a result of the anxiety. So the behaviors can be that person doesn't go take the test at all, or that person had so much anxiety to take that test that afterwards they just like drink until they're passed out, right? Blacked out.
Mm-hmm.
So when we talk about anxiety, we really want to look at what is the fear that it's really about? How is it manifesting in the brain? How is it, like, what emotions are coming up from that? And how is that making you act?
Mm-hmm.
So if you're behaving in a way that reinforces the anxiety, you're not going to feel any better. So, for example, anybody who's considering sobriety, I guess, from alcohol. Alcohol is actually a stimulant and a depressant. And so when you consume alcohol over time, it will make it really difficult for your nervous system to activate the other side of the system, which is the calming nervous system. It's the parasympathetic nervous system. So when we get out of fight or flight, that part of our nervous system is supposed to kick on. But a lot of us don't. We just stay in a perpetual sense of anxiety. And the reason is because we don't have one anxiety. We have like hundreds of anxieties that we have in our society right now. Am I safe? Am I going to lose my rights? Am I going to be able to afford rent next month? Am I going to do this work project? Is my partner mad at me? Is my child sick? All of those things make human life so complex. It can be so overwhelming. So when we talk about anxiety, we talk about fear, we talk about being so overwhelmed that you cannot function. And that all comes from the brain being stuck in survival mode.
Mm-hmm. Another question I have is with so much anxiety going around, I know that it leads into sometimes us having toxic relationships with ourselves. What I wanted to ask is how can we get out of being in toxic relationships with ourselves?
I think if a client had asked me that, I would want to understand in what ways does that person have a toxic relationship with themselves? And that would tell me a way
Mm-hmm.
to start getting out of that. So let me think of an example. So let's say someone grew up in a family home where there was a lot of like it was like walking on eggshells. Like there was a lot of fear at home. Maybe a parent was really what is the word? Unpredictable.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that can mean a lot of things. Maybe there was like physical abuse, emotional abuse, whatever, or maybe a parent, would flip out or whatever. So that itself creates attachment issues. And when I say attachment, that is our ability to relate to other people. Excuse me. And our earliest experiences with our caregivers, whether that's a parent or whoever else, whatever those experiences were, they will impact how we relate to other people. If you had a parent that was secure and they met your needs and they can attune to you, you will be more secure within yourself and able to relate to others in a healthier way. If you did not have that and you had a parent that was inconsistent, maybe an alcoholic parent, like somebody put that there, maybe there was substance abuse, maybe there was untreated mental illnesses, maybe there was other factors that made the home stressful, maybe poverty, any of those things, right? Uh, so when the home does not have basic needs met, that child is going to grow up already with the anxiety of, I cannot depend on this caregiver. I have to depend on myself. Or they become so codependent that they can't also rely on themselves. And so when we talk about a toxic relationship with ourselves, it starts as early as our infancy. And then all of our experiences that come from that will either reinforce that or or help us come out of that. So if you have other family members that are in the same dynamic, you're gonna have the same thing. You're gonna be the same dysfunctional child role in childhood that you'll be in adulthood. And that is the toxic relationship. That is staying in that dysfunctional family role. And when you take that with you and you start to have your adult relationships, you're going to take all that crap and you're going to give it to that person, and it's going to keep you in the same thing. I want to say this a little bit better so this makes sense. Um, I want to say it this way.
Nope.
So I work with a lot of clients that have a really tough relationships with themselves. Uh, these are clients who will continue to say yes to toxic relationships because they don't feel that they deserve better. And the reason that they don't feel that they deserve better are from those experiences really early on when they're babies and when they're children, and then all those other experiences. So if you continually have experiences that keep telling you you're undeserving, so maybe you're surrounded by a bunch of abusive people, you will start to believe that, which means that will impact your decisions as an adult. You might not say no. You might not have boundaries. You may not have any idea what your needs are. And so you'll go into a relationship allowing a lot of toxic things to happen or even abusive things to happen because you inherently don't value yourself either. You haven't had experiences that show you how to love and value yourself because you probably were around parents or other people that did not meet your needs, did not attune to you, and so that's what you learned. So when we talk about a toxic relationship with yourself, it you want to look at how that started in the first place, and then you want to see how that is getting in the way in your adult relationships. So I did mention real quick the dysfunctional family roles. So like uh, there's a lot of research that they have a lot of complex ones, but there's a couple main ones. So like when I talk about dysfunctional family roles, I'm talking about the hero, the mascot, the lost child, the golden child, the parentified child. So these are all roles that we tend to fall in our family of origin. When I say family of origin, that means the family that you grew up with. And if it was not a healthy dynamic, you're you will fall in one of these dysfunctional roles. And so as a child, you fall into these roles because your brain is not developed. Your brain is not even developed till you're like 26. So when you're a baby, you don't have this part at all. You only have this. So you really can't make sense. So when you're small and you're in an environment that's volatile or unpredictable, that's scary. So what a child will subconsciously do is they will fall into these roles to protect themselves. So if someone is the hero, they tend to be the eldest. They're the ones that, okay, I'm going to take care of everything. I'm going to take all of the burden. I'm going to manage this house. They are like the really mature child, and they're the ones that keep the peace. And they have learned to do that as a way to manage the chaos at home. The problem with that is if they continue that role in adulthood, that means that they will abandon themselves. They may have experienced self-erasure, that they won't know their needs. They will only take on and be overworked and taken advantage of. And when you bring that into a relationship, that creates a lot of toxic dynamics. So like, do you want me to keep going about these dysfunctional family roles?
Yeah, you keep going. No worries. I'm watching the time.
Okay.
I know you're.
I'll keep going, y'all. I'll keep going. What's the next one? Okay, so the mascot. This mascot, if you were in this role, you were the child who made the jokes. You were the child that was extroverted. And, you know, when there was fighting or whatever going on, you were the mascot to quell the chaos by bringing humor to it. And the problem with that is also you don't get a sense to know your inner self well enough. These are people as adults who have a lot of sarcasm, or they're, they may say something like they went through this horrible trauma, but they're like making light of it. And the problem with that is that you will never fully connect to those deep experiences as a human being. And that will create a lot of anxiety, that will create a lot of depression, because you're misaligned from what is actually happening on the inside. You don't really know what your emotions are. You don't really know what they're telling you. You're just on very superficial level of being. So that's the mascot. If another one is the lost child, this tends to be the younger one, but honestly, anybody can fall in any of these roles, and they can also cycle at different times. You can be more than one as well, uh, especially if you're an only child. But the lost child is the one who's kind of back in the scenes. They're forgotten, and these are the ones who will really struggle with isolation as an adult, because that's what they did as a child. They isolated, they were forgotten, they're in the back of the scenes. They'll never think they're important enough, and they really struggle with saying no. And so unfortunately, a lot of these people also gravitate to abusive relationships. um, okay, and then I'll talk about the golden child. The golden child is very similar to the parentified child, actually. I think they're almost synonymous. But basically, this person is where the parent puts a lot of inappropriate burden on their child. Maybe they're sharing a lot of adult conversations that they shouldn't. Basically, that child is like their therapist. So lack of boundaries, and a lot of overwhelm on that child to basically be the one responsible to managing the parent's emotions. So the golden child will be love bombed. If they have another sibling, they will be put on a pedestal. If you've got narcissistic parents, they'll pin you against each other's siblings with the golden child. And the problem with that is that that person is filled with anxiety. Again, they are taking care of everybody else's needs but their own. So again, that can create a lot of toxic dynamics in relationships. And then finally, I'll talk about this, the scapegoat. This is also a very common role to play. That's what I was in childhood. I probably still am, because I told you guys how I changed my worldview when I was 19 in the military. So I'm the black sheep of my family. So I will say this. It's hard to be in this role because those who are scapegoated are the ones who get the brunt of all the toxic stuff in the family. They are, sometimes they are, the fingers pointed at them as a way to deflect from the parents actually creating issues. And these are the ones that you will see struggling with a lot of addictions. They will be struggling with a lot of behavioral stuff. And the reason why, that's why they call them the scapegoat. And you look at them, they'll be like, oh, they're horrible. Look at them. They're not. The scapegoat is the one who sees all the bullshit. The scapegoat is the one who sees the truth. And they're the ones who actually start breaking a lot of those generational traumas. And so that's why they get the brunt of all the crap. And so I will say this, in my experience growing up as the scapegoat, before I started getting help to heal myself, I had a toxic relationship with myself for a long time. Being the scapegoat makes you think that you are the bad person. It makes you think that you're always doing wrong. And when you think like that all the time, you will lose your sense of reality. And I think in my case, that probably fed into a lot of those years of addiction where I harmed myself, or I didn't have healthy boundaries and did a lot of things that really hurt my sense of self. And I think that is from all the conditioning that made me think I was bad, that a lot of it was unresolved shame from traumas that I was holding. And so I think when you're in that role, that's the beginning of the conditioning. And I think conditioning is the big word to really think about. If you feel like you have a toxic relationship with yourself or with other people, you really need to start looking at your conditioning. You have to look at your experiences growing up in your family. You have to look at your value system. You have to look at society and see how that all has created a narrative in your mind that says that you're unworthy of love, or that has conditioned you to disrespect your own self. And I think when you can acknowledge that, that's when you start to get healthy. It's not about getting another person to acknowledge that you're worthy. You have to be that one to do that. And I know that's really cliche. It's like you got to love yourself first. So I'll put it in plain terms so you can understand what that means. Um, I think in my case, loving myself meant saying no to relationships that were really difficult to do that. Family relationships, having to say no, to go no contact, to stand up to my own parents and speak my truth. I think loving yourself is that. Loving yourself is having boundaries, because your boundaries are the thing that teaches other people to respect you. And if you were never conditioned to respect yourself because you were surrounded by people who never respected you, it's going to be really hard to know how to do that. And so you're going to keep looking to other people who will perpetuate that hurt, because that's all you know. So you have to be exposed to other people. You have to be exposed to other information. You have to be exposed to healthier people so they can also show you how to love yourself. And then eventually you become stronger, and as uncomfortable and as fight or flighty it may feel to say no, that's how you love yourself. It's those steps one by one. Like me choosing no longer to drink, me drinking forever was how I hurt myself. So a lot of those things, it's unraveling a lot of those conditioning.
Amazing. I love that you were so open and vulnerable about your journey. To be honest with you, it's beautiful. Thank you. I appreciate
Yeah,
you. Thank you. Um, what is attachment trauma?
that's a great question. I think attachment stuff is very buzzwordy right now. So yeah, we got a lot of that talk, but I think the reason people are curious about that is because we have so much toxic relationships, and we are nothing but conditioned to have toxic relationships with ourselves. So we are just craving to understand how to better love ourselves and other people. And so a place I like to start is attachment, because you want to understand how you're relating. And so attachment theory kind of categorizes how we relate. There's other subcategories and it can get kind of complicated, but what you guys really need to know is that there's secure, avoidant, and anxious. Secure means you show up in a relationship, you can deal with vulnerability, you can express how you feel, you don't give mixed messages, you're pretty consistent. If you're the avoidant side of the attachment, you do not like vulnerability. When people get too close, push away. And somebody who's on the anxious side, it's more kind of like codependent. So when they feel distance, they pull more, and they may feel clingy to someone who's avoidant. So all of those ways of relating happen in infancy, right? And so those early experiences with the caregiver. So again, going back to what I was talking about, if you had a parent or caregiver who was attuned to you, who was consistent, predictable, then you would create a secure attachment, because that is the first relationship you create. That becomes your imprint. So when we talk about attachment trauma, I'm really looking at the people who struggle with the anxious or avoidant side. And these are people who've experienced traumas when they're babies or throughout their lives. And so attachment trauma doesn't also only happen in infancy. It could be any type of abuse that you may feel or experience throughout life, because that will absolutely change the way you relate in relationships. and it will change the way you think, and it will damage a lot of how you are. What am I trying to say? So let me get back to this. So when we talk about traumas, we talk about something that really creates an impact on the brain. So when we talk about traumas, it actually is like us in the field, it's the way we describe it. It's a almost permanent injury to the brain, and it's housed in that primitive part of the brain. Because when you experience a trauma, your brain is in fight or flight, and your brain is saying, we need to survive. This is life or death. So there are little traumas and there are big traumas. So big T's and little T's. Big T's are, yeah, these are funny words, right? These are counselor words. I'm picking this up. I didn't make this up. So big T's are like the letter T. So big T would be like if you're in the military, like combat traumas, maybe a car accident or sexual assaults, things like that. Those are big T's. Little T's are also attachment trauma. So this could be, maybe you had a parent that had narcissistic personality disorder, and their behaviors, the abusive, manipulative behaviors, those are little traumas, but they are consistent over time, over the years. When we talk about attachment trauma, it's not just PTSD. If you guys aren't familiar, when you watch this, PTSD are the trauma symptoms that come up after a trauma. And you are diagnosed with PTSD if you have trauma symptoms that are persisting after 6 months after the thing has happened, because it's normal to be in a trauma state after something. But chronic PTSD, CPTSD, you might also see a lot of this with the attachment discussion. That is what you'll see when we look at attachment traumas, because attachment traumas are not just one event. There are a series of events that have happened over your lifetime that continue to make it really difficult for you to understand healthy relationships, how to relate in a healthy way, and how to treat yourself in a healthy way. So attachment traumas can be bullying, like that's a little T, right? So if you're bullied in school, or you're bullied by your parents, that's a thing too. Those are attachment traumas. Being put into foster care, that is attachment trauma.
100%.
Yeah. So you basically really want to look at those moments of disconnect that really impact your sense of self and other people. And basically attachment traumas will absolutely make it extremely, and this is how you'll know, it'll make it really, really hard to trust. And that's also an impact of abuse. So if you've experienced a lot of those things, it's really hard to trust people. So if you find that happening, there could have been some sort of traumas that really got in the way. Because if you can't feel trusting of another person, you cannot be your whole self. You cannot be your vulnerable self. And if you're not that, you're not really going to have a connected relationship. And it's most likely going to be toxic in some way.
Yeah, I'm still fighting with that. A couple of those things you said actually happened to me. I was actually giving up at 13 years old. I've been on my own ever since. And yeah, there's a lot of deep stuff in my life story. I've been through 15 car accidents plus. It's my body, like, how's this trauma? It's like deep. Like when you brought up CPS, what was it?
It's just chronic PTSD, CPTSD.
Yeah.
That just means you've experienced PTSD symptoms probably most of your life.
Sure. I think that yeah, especially when it comes to trusting people is difficult, because I actually have a question regarding that. Like, just what is the fear of abandonment rooted in? Mines come from constantly having to let go of people. Sometimes choosing the wrong people to be around, but also just people that come into your life that you kind of want to be around, but then you have to release them for whatever said reasons come across. And then obviously from a younger age, being adopted, then my adopted family, released me. And then from then on, I had to kind of go back and forth with releasing other people and then releasing me. It's just been like a constant thing with that. So constantly being around individuals that I feel like, I have to question continuously from time to time, especially as of now with me pushing forward what I have now. Um, Regarding human, you meet a lot of interesting people that want to um, kind of steer things in their own direction for whatever cause they have. So
Mhm.
yeah,
Well,
I
thank you
can
for
definitely.
being vulnerable and sharing that.
You're
That's,
welcome.
those are
You're
tough
welcome.
experiences to have. They're very painful.
Yes, they are.
Yeah.
They are.
Um, well, abandonment is really painful for us human beings because our brains don't like that. It's actually like that's why a rejection abandonment can feel like physically painful.
Mm,
We are not designed to be individualistic. When we are like, I'll put it this way. Okay, so in primitive times, the way we survived life was pretty simple. It's like eat, sleep, don't get killed by this thing. And so, like when when you weren't in your tribe, you were more likely to die. So it is a survival mechanism. So it's biologically within us that if we are not with people, our brain is like we're gonna die. That's how the brain is actually constructed in that way. It's a survival mechanism so that when you actually feel abandonment, that's why it feels painful. That's why your brain is in a trauma response. And because your brain is thinking, I am more likely to die now. So abandonment wounds, the way they show up are in your trauma responses in your relationships. And so there are four types of trauma responses. There's fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. Those are all actions of your fight or flight nervous system, like I talked about earlier. So what that means is if you're in a relationship and let's say you had a fight, I actually talked about, wait, I didn't post this yet. I It's scheduled. So if you're on my page, I've been doing Love is Blind recaps from the attachment trauma lens. And one of them coming up, I actually dissect an argument where one of them is experiencing an abandonment wound and it's showing up in that argument. So what had happened was the other person, they were having an argument and that other person left to cool down, right? Which is actually important to do because if you're in the heat of the moment, a lot of things can be said and you don't want to go that route. But
mm,
that person left. But that person, I don't think they told the other person that they were leaving. So that person, all they're interpreting is they're leaving me altogether. And so a rejection abandonment means I'm not good enough. I am worthless. And it goes right back, and I hope this doesn't bring up a painful moment for you. It will trigger that abandonment wound of being given up.
mm,
And that same moment of feeling I was given up, I was not worthy enough, plays in that conflict. So if someone leaves to cool off and someone misinterprets that as, wow, they're just leaving me right now, I am a horrible person, I'm not lovable.
mm,
So that person may engage in one of those four things. They may fight, where they get really aggressive, right? Because they're fighting to deflect from that pain that they're being abandoned. Or they will flight, they'll leave the
mm,
situation. That's my hard one. That's the one of the problems I had for the longest time. Um, Freeze is you're just like paralyzed. You're shut down. You can't say anything. You're just quiet. And then fawn is basically a very codependent move in a trauma response, whatever it is. It's like you take all the blame, even though you're not to blame. You
mm,
you're apologizing. You're like you're I don't know a better way to say fawn, but basically you're trying to take the brunt of everything to make it better just so it can go away.
mm.
So if you're struggling with abandonment wounds, you will see that in your conflicts, in your relationships, and you will see the behaviors being one of those four trauma responses.
Wow. Wow. I know you have to go soon, so
Oh,
I'm going to
yes.
move this forward here. I'm going to ask you three more questions. All right. So the first one is, I know that you talked about on your website becoming the love that we seek. So I wanted to ask you, how does a person become the love that they seek?
I'm going to give it from two perspectives. When I originally started writing that a couple years ago, what that meant was we're a whole we're a whole set of people trying to find a partner to love us in the ways that our parents didn't or our caregivers didn't. And when you search for that in another person, you can hear my daughter back there. She's very fussy today. She, um, oh my God, what was I saying? What did I just say?
You said when you search for that in another person.
Okay, thanks.
No
When you
problem.
search for that in another person, that will create a toxic dynamic because you're putting that expectation on a person and they may or may not be the person that needs to meet that. So when we talk about attachment traumas, the way you heal is actually start to understand your needs and how to self-soothe and meet that for yourself. That is essentially is becoming the love that you're seeking. Because if you're the love that you seek from someone is they respect you, they value you, they spend time with you, they prioritize you instead of they put I. And for someone who has had attachment traumas, it is really hard to be in that space to go, I respect myself. I value myself. I prioritize myself. So um, when you become the love that you seek, you're essentially healing your inner child. And I'm going into this other perspective for me personally. Me having my daughter, I am confronted by moments where I have to make parenting decisions or I have to regulate my emotions to respond in a secure and safe way to my child. And every time that happens, that reinforces how I needed to be with myself because I had undiagnosed ADHD growing up. And so it's really hard to understand if you don't understand that. And so when we talk about becoming the love that you seek, for me, it was I have to learn how to respect myself and regulate myself and self-soothe and do all these things. And if I can value myself, the things around me will change, and they have. Because when I didn't value myself, the people, the places, and the things around me were nothing but a reflection of that. When I started valuing myself, I started saying no to things. I started prioritizing my health. And when you make decisions like that, of course, the things around you are going to change. If you're treating yourself right, you're going to have other people that are going to treat yourself right. And you're also going to learn how to teach other people to do that too. So becoming the love that you seek means being the person that you needed to be when you were little. And when you get to that place, it is much easier to connect with other people who may be more compatible and reflect that back to you. Because when you're with somebody in a relationship, you're essentially, it's a revealing of yourself. And so there has to
Mm,
be value there.
mm. Okay, second question, because I know you know it's going to time is ticking.
Yeah.
Um, how can we shift our humanity in a direction that is positive? Mm.
I think we got to
Especially
keep
with so many
doing
things.
this. We have to do this. We have to communicate with one another.
Mm.
I think if anybody's on TikTok and following some of the restrict ban and some of those policies that are going through, they're pretty scary from losing our ability to communicate. But what I found that was really amazing with the advent of TikTok was the fact that all of us were communicating with one another. We're no longer in this divide. And I think the way out of this is the ability to connect with the rest of us. And I that's what I think the answer is. We have to
Mm.
connect and communicate with each other on a human level.
Yes, we do 100%. You know, before I get to my last question, I have a small question.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
can try to answer it as fast as possible because I want to be respectful for your time.
yeah, for sure.
But how do we um focus on ourselves while, as an individual, while still being part of the community? I think I've never asked that question to anybody before, and I always found it to be interesting. Because you're like, no, focus on yourself, work on yourself, value yourself, but you still have to go out into the world, and you
Yeah.
know, be around other people is the word I want to use, the phrase I want to use. Yeah.
I actually have an answer for that. I feel like I came to this revelation not too long ago. Um,
Mm-hmm.
the oh my gosh, no, ADHD. The thought is gone. I want to bring it back. What was your question? Ask it real quick before it's gone.
No, my question was, how do we, this is good, how do we still focus on ourselves and develop ourselves as an individual, value ourselves, love ourselves, and respect ourselves and our boundaries
Oh,
while still going out into the world and the community and being part of that also simultaneously?
yes. Thank you.
Yeah.
Take care of your energy. And what I mean by that is, will be surprising. Are you nourishing yourself with the right foods? Are you, do you have the right boundaries in place right now if there's abusive people around you? Are you doing things to take care of your mind, or are you doom scrolling all day? Are you engaging with people that bring light to you or darkness to you? So when we take care of our energies, we get ourselves in that aligned, healthy place, that absolutely impacts the decisions that we make with people around us. If we don't take care of our energy, we go out in the world. And I will say right now, when I go out into the world, people are angry, people are rude, people are aggressive, people are upset, people are hateful. We have got to take care of our energy from a singular level, because when we go out in the world and we radiate that kindness, uh, people are more tend to respond to that. So my
Mm,
answer is, take care of yourselves. Everything that you can do to take care of your needs to make you feel healthy.
mm, mm. And last but not least, the famous question that I usually ask at the end of every interview: what does being human mean to you?
Being human to me means being, hold on, something's coming. Give me a moment.
Yeah, no problem. Take your time.
I feel like old programming, I almost said like being human to me is to experience love. I'm gonna be honest, I don't know how to answer that. I have changed as a person.
Mm,
Maybe being human is just experiencing all the changes.
mm.
I don't know. I don't know what that answer is right now. It's
That's a
weird.
very interesting answer.
Yeah. There's a lot of things that come to mind. Being human to me means being honest, but that can also imply like, if you're not, then you're not human, because we're messes too. So I don't know. Maybe being human is just being, just
Mm,
existing.
interesting.
I, I
Well, thank you for
sorry
not.
guys, I didn't really have a straight answer there. So
No, it's no problem. I mean, thank you for not, like producing the answer that sounds good and rather just genuinely being like, okay, for once, you're in a transitional state in life. So am I, to be honest.
yeah.
You know, I usually don't answer my own question, but I'll just say, in my opinion, I think being human is being here in this space and time and having this experience that you share with other people and learning from that experience in this space and time before you go on to wherever else you're going to go. Because I consider being human as like a vessel.
Yeah.
It's like a stopping. This is like a place and time that we're in, like a dimension. But there's other things that we go into once we pass. That's my firm belief, or some of us come back for another rodeo. I mean, I think it all depends
Yeah.
on what you signed up for outside of your vessel, right? So that's what I think being human actually like means to me. I'm just gonna fill that gap in. But if I could just slide in this one last question,
Sure.
what has being a mother taught you about being a woman?
Whoa. Hmm.
I know that usually.
I can tell you what has taught me. It has taught me that women are continuing to experience atrocities and injustices just as much as other minority groups and people. And I,
Mm,
being a mother, my purpose as a human, and I can't speak for everybody else. I feel like for me, my purpose as being a human is I'm answering my ancestors, and they're asking me to break generational traumas. I think my family line has been hurting for a long time. And
mm,
I think being a woman, if you choose to be a mother and you choose to have a child and you bring life into the world, especially now, I can't help but wonder if that you wouldn't feel like you're trying your best to break those generational curses so that we can be happier in life.
beautifully said. I really respect your honesty. I really do.
For
And
sure.
it's like, wow, I can actually feel it when you say it, see it.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on,
Mm-hmm.
but I think you'll
Definitely.
handle it gracefully. Sorry. I just had,
Yeah,
to.
all the
I
time.
yeah.
All good.
I just want to say you really do live up to your name from the first time that I had you on Campfire Sessions to this interview. You were still graceful. I could definitely feel the dynamic and change within you. I too have ADHD. If you notice, I do move around during the interview a little bit. Um,
Yeah.
I don't necessarily, I do get stuck in thought too because I call it getting excited to speak, right? I just have so much going on in my head that I get
Mm-hmm.
excited to speak. The only time that it kind of paces itself is like during these interviews and when I appear on big news outlets and things of that nature, or magazines, or if it's a video interview with a bigger company, my brain gets into a pacing. So everything's going really fast, but what's coming out of my mouth is like at a pace. It's very interesting. The
Mm-hmm.
skill set to be able to do that. So I just wanted to thank you before I end this interview for being vulnerable, open, and for sharing with us what is it that you do. I do wish that we could have you on for a longer period of time, but I do understand that you have other responsibilities that you do have to take care of. And I will be in contact with you within the next 24 hours after this interview, along with this interview being posted within the next 24 hours too, with
Oh,
links to the interview,
that's
so that
great.
other people may be able to learn, feel, that there's another person out there that's going through similarities in which they're going through too,
Yeah,
and the importance of the connectivity that we must preserve as we continue to move forward as humans in the future. So
absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. It's good to see you again.
it's good to see you too, Grace. Like I said, continue to be graceful. Oh, congratulations on being a mother for a second time. Um, I didn't even know you was a mother the first time around. So,
My husband has a daughter. It's my stepdaughter.
oh,
Mhm.
oh, okay. Oh, excuse me. So let me take back the
No,
second time.
it's all good.
And replace that with congratulations on becoming a mother you yourself. You know, oh man, son, cool. I'm looking forward to having kids myself, but we'll see what happens in the future.
Yeah,
Um, one last thing though I want to say is that nobody's perfect. This is for everybody out there, including ourselves. Nobody's perfect, and that don't wait until you feel like it's just right to go out there and meet somebody. As the days go by, we might experience different things, but we're all work in progresses, and that never stops. And that message is included, I'm including that to myself, to you, and to everyone who will be viewing this interview. So
Absolutely.
without further ado, Grace, have a good night,
Bye.
and I'll be in touch.
All right.
And
Thank you
remember,
so
everybody,
much.
you're very welcome. And remember, everyone, we are all human. All right? See you later.
Take care.
Take care.